Hey everyone, Stormer here and welcome back to From the Depths. And today I'm going to teach you guys about fuel engines and how to make really good ones. So as you can see, I have a bunch of engines laid out here, and I'm going to teach you the principles and then also show you some of the engines that I've built. So obviously in the game they have tutorials so you can kind of figure out how you need to do it. You just need a generator, you need crankshafts, you have cylinders that connect to the crankshafts, and then you have to have exhaust coming out of the cylinders so they don't overheat, and then you can either put injectors in there which make a ton of power but they're not fuel efficient, or you could put carburetors next to them which are a little bit more fuel efficient, but you need carburetors for superchargers and turbochargers. So like this one, you put a supercharger on that, and on this one you put a turbo connecting to the cylinder and the carburetor. Superchargers, they make the engine more efficient at lower RPMs, and turbochargers, they make the engine more efficient at higher RPMs. Now, turbochargers at the moment are broken. They are very broken, and I'm going to raise this into the air because the bobbing is very annoying. But turbos, they don't affect the efficiency of the engines at the moment. It's a bug. Hopefully the game devs realize that and fix it very soon. This engine here, this is a gas guzzler, and I think this might have been the first engine I ever made. It's a 16 cylinder. I call it the X16 because there's 4 different rows instead. Like this is a V, like that's a W, and then just all that, that's an X. So this is a X16, and it makes 6,400 horsepower. That's a lot, but if you look at this, at 10% usage, it uses 5.9 fuel a second, and at max speed, it's 84.5 a second, which that's a gas guzzler, and that's what I mean by the injectors just sucking fuel. That's a really good engine if you want power and you have just tons and tons of room and fuel to burn, fuel to waste. If you want to kill the environment, go ahead, build that thing. This is a W16 I made a while ago that every single cylinder has a turbo on it, but it's not a great engine, so I'm gonna skip over that one. This engine here I really like. It's a supercharged V4, or flat 4 technically, but it's just 4 cylinders. It's super compact. It's a 3x3x2 except for the generator there. You have 1 carburetor and supercharger for 2 cylinders on each side. It's super compact and it's super efficient. So it makes 400 horsepower, which is pretty good. And at 10% power, it uses 0.2 fuel a second. That is insane. At full power, it uses 4.6 fuel a second. So that is really good. When you're making engines, efficiency and power are the 2 things you want to focus on. And then next is how much space it's going to take up, because obviously a smaller engine is going to cost less for campaign. The less fuel it takes, the less fuel has to be transferred or given to your ship from a sky fortress, and also the further you can travel. This engine would also make a pretty good battery charger. So if you just needed an engine to power batteries and not have actual horsepower for anything, I just crank up the battery charge, this 4th slider here. Also, this is a modular design, so that you could just copy these 3 blocks here and paste them right here, and you just have to connect the exhaust and you'd have more power. That's it. It's super cool with the modular design. This one's my new 16 cylinder. So you see how big this one is? That's pretty crazy, and this one is less efficient than this one, and this one takes up way less space, and this one makes about the same power. Yeah, this one makes 200 more power. This one makes just a tiny bit less power, but it's so much more compact, and it's also modular, so where you could just copy what's here and paste it here, and there you go, and it's more efficient. Also, you can make this an 8-cylinder because it's modular, so you could actually cut off half of this here, and you'd have a 8-cylinder. There's 1 turbo per 4 cylinders here, so this is a quad turbo 16 cylinder. And then how we have these ones on top and bottom not connected to the crankshaft is adapters. So you can put one adapter off of the crankshaft and cylinders can attach to the adapters like it was a crankshaft. But you can only put one adapter. You can't put a line of adapters. That doesn't work. This one's pretty good too because it's 1600 horsepower and at 10%, it uses 1.3 fuel a second, and it's 19.2 fuel a second at full power. So that's a pretty good engine there. I made an efficient i4 and a powerful i4. So these ones are also modular designs where you can extend them. You could make a i8, an i6, an i12, whatever you want. Ship, get out of here. Get out of here. The efficient i4, it's a lot smaller than this one. It just has one carburetor per 2 cylinders, and it makes 400 horsepower. That's pretty good, and it uses hardly any more fuel than the supercharged V4 I showed you a few minutes ago. The reason you'd want to use an inline 4 instead of this V4 here is for if you need an engine in a super compact space, because if you look at this is a 1x3 by however long you make the engine. It's a 1x3. You can fit that anywhere. You can fit it in a tiny ship. You can fit it against the wall of a ship if you just need an engine in there. You could have this as a battery charger. You could have this just as a backup engine if your main engine gets destroyed. That's why you have an inline engine, is because you can put them anywhere. And then the powerful i4, every single cylinder has one fuel injector, so it's a little bit bigger, and it makes 800 horsepower. It uses a little bit more fuel, but you get twice the power out of it. So once again, very tiny engine that can just pound out so much power. Over here I made a V12, which this is another modular design, so you can make a V4, a V6, a V10, a V12, a V16, anything you want. It's a very simple design. It's literally a crankshaft, 2 rows of cylinders, and a carburetor on top of each cylinder. As you see, this is pretty compact. It's 5 wide and 2 tall, and there's even empty space. So you could fit this in pretty small places too, and it makes 1200 horsepower, which that's a decent amount of power. At 10%, it uses 1 unit of fuel every second. That's decently efficient. So, you know, you get a lot of power for a decent amount of fuel, and 14.4 fuel a second at max power. That's a decent amount of power for that much fuel. If you wanted to make it more efficient, you could just slap superchargers on top of all of these. It'd be one higher, but over here I made a turbo V4, once again, modular design like the supercharged V4. This one's kind of a stupid design because the turbos don't work at the moment, so it's actually less efficient than the supercharged one because the turbos, they're supposed to take down the amount of fuel usage at max power. So this one's 4.8 and this one is 4.6 with the supercharger. The supercharger at the moment is actually making it more efficient than the turbos are. This one at 100% usage should be 4.8, and then this one, the turbo one, should be 4.6. In the future, when turbos and superchargers get fixed, which one do you use for what engine? The turbos you want to use on engines that you are going to be using for propulsion. So any ship that you're constantly going to be driving at full speed, you want turbos on. Engines for ships that are staying stationary most of the time, you want superchargers for, such as a Sky Fortress. That's not moving or using that much power ever. Even though the turbo is only connected to one of the cylinders, because it's connected to a carburetor that's connected to both cylinders get the power of a turbo, even though this one is having the exhaust taken out of it through the turbo. My last design is a powerful 8-cylinder. It's like this one, just chopped off in the middle, but there's one change to it. There's a fuel injector for each cylinder. So there's only 2 fuel injectors on each side, so it's not 4 fuel injectors, it's 2 on each side, so that each cylinder has one injector. There's not 4 because then each cylinder would have 2 injectors. Basically, it's this one where it still has the carburetor and the turbo in it. It just has the extra couple injectors on it. It's half the space as this one because it's half the cylinders, and it makes more power. It makes 2,400 horsepower, and this one makes 1,600. And it uses 2.2 fuel a second at 10% and 30.7 fuel at full power, when this one uses a lot less, but you get so much more power out of it. This engine is really good for decent efficiency. It's kind of efficient, but a lot of power and very compact. How much horsepower do you need? It really depends, and honestly, I'm not for sure on anything. I just know that, like, a Sky Fortress doesn't need hardly any power. Some Sky Fortresses, they come with over 1,000 horsepower. You don't need to. You can put, like, 100 horsepower probably, and it'd be fine. Like, my Sky Fortress, it has 400 horsepower, and it does just as fine as something with 1,600 horsepower. For a ship, a tiny ship, you could go anywhere with a couple hundred horsepower, but if you're doing like a medium ship or a big ship, I do over 1,000 horsepower. And if you're charging tons of batteries, maybe even do 2 engines. Maybe you don't want to do a 6,400 horsepower engine. Maybe you want to do 2 engines, because one engine gets destroyed, you're a sitting duck. If you have 2 engines, one engine gets destroyed, you can still go places. I might be pretty new to the game, but if there is one thing that I know how to build in this game, it's engines. At the end of the day, how you make a good engine is you balance horsepower with efficiency. So that's it for my tutorial with engines. I want to say thank you guys so much for your support on the series so far. Next time, me and Philip are going to get back into building ships and blowing each other up and fun stuff like that. Thank you guys so much for all the well wishes of joining the game and all the helpful tips. You guys are amazing. Also do a Steam engine tutorial pretty soon, because I also know Steam engines pretty dang well. If you like this one, share it with a friend, and if you want more like this, hit subscribe. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.